So I'm just going to start with those two first. We'll do that graph based on what we talked about. So you have to think ahead for the first one here, at least. Because you're going to be going left 100 degrees, you write out your base x values. So 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. And you're going to be subtracting actually 100 from each one of those. So you're actually going to start at negative 100. Okay. And then you're going to be going up from 90 from there. Okay. So 90 minus 100 would be negative 10 degrees. Okay. Or you can think about just moving each one of these up by 90 degrees each time. Okay. So the next one would be 80 degrees. And then another 90 would be 170. And then another 90 would be 260. Okay. So just to make sure that's right. So we've gone up by 90, up by 90, up by 90, and up by 90 more. Okay. So our graph actually has to start at negative 100, and then negative 10 is going to be a value, then 80 degrees, then 70 degrees. Okay. So as long as you're leaving spaces within your graph that sort of look like those values, you're going to be fine. So I'm going to just make sure that I include enough space for each one. Draw my line here. Wait till the options come up. Shape it line, just make it a little heavier. Okay, and I'm going to draw one more line. Okay, if everything's going to be going up one value, I'm gonna draw my line a little bit lower than half just to give myself some space, because I know my graph's going to be a little bit higher. Okay, thicken up this line a little bit. Okay, all right, so I'm going to start with my graph, and I'm going to write in my values that I need to have. All right. So I'm going to start at negative 100. So let's say my negative 10 degrees was right here. Okay. Negative 10. So I'm going to start just a little bit off the center with negative 10. And I'm going to go back. It really doesn't matter how many spaces, as long as like every 90 degrees you have the same amount of squares that you're using. So let's go let's go every 4. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll put a dot back here and call this negative 100. Okay, so I'm going to go move forward 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll call this 80, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to call this 170. Okay, so if you remember what we talked about before, your sign of 0, so when things are 0, it starts at 0. Your first value is going to be 0. You're going to be starting way back here at this negative 100, and we'll make our ones here. Let's call this 1, and we'll call this, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll call this 1, 2. Okay. What you're going to do is if you started your sine rule here, or your sine function here, it would be going up in a loop, starts at 0, it goes up to a top, and it comes back down. Okay, it goes down below, and then it goes back up. But every point has now been raised by 1. It's moved up 1. So your first point is actually going to start right here at negative 100, and your next point is going to be moved up 1 as well. It's going to be I should use a different color. Maybe I'll just recolor this one. This red, just so it's a little bit easier for you to see. Okay, my next one is going to be up here. Oh, I gotta go back to green. up here at 2. And then my next one is going to be going up. My next one is going to be going back down to here. And then I'm going to go even further down to here. Okay. Now if I think of my values that I had before, I had 0, 90, 180, 270. I actually need one more, and I might have just run out of space, and that's my fault for not leaving enough parts to this graph. But it's going to go 1, 2, 3, and there should have actually been another one here. Adding more, this would be 260, and my value would have come back up to here. Okay, so I end up with a graph that has just only had a phase shift, okay, left by 100 degrees, and it is moved up 1. Okay, so your graph for this first one is going to look like this in the end. Okay. I'll do one more question from your homework. Okay, question B, and then hopefully the rest of it you sort of catching on. So the next one, what I have to know is that I'm moving my whole graph up 3 spots, so I got to leave some space above. So I'm going to draw my x-axis a little bit lower, and I'm going to be multiplying all of my original y values by 2. So it's going to go even higher than that. So I have to make sure that if I've moved everything up, if I'm multiplying by 2, then I also have to be able to add 3 to those numbers. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So I'm going to first draw in my shapes, draw in my lines, my axes. Everything's going to be moved up, so I'm going to put my axes way down here. Just leave lots of space above because I'm moving up and I'm multiplying everything together. Make that just a little bit thicker as well. And I'll do one more. The graph hasn't really moved left or right, so I don't have to worry about that. So everything's going to be out to the right side, so I can even leave some space out here on the right hand side because I know I don't have to move anything. Okay, so here's my y-axis. Make it just a little bit thicker. Okay, and now I'm going to draw in my scale. So nothing happens to my original base values. I am starting at 0, and this time let's go, well, we can still go, since I've got more space, let's go every 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's call this 90 degrees. It's just important that your scale is the same all the way across. 1, 2, 3, 4. This was 180. 1, 2, 3, 4. This was 270. And 1, 2, 3, 4. This was 360. Okay, so what I do know is that my base graph starts at 0 and it goes up to 1, and then it goes back down here, and then it goes below, and then it goes back up. I'm going to draw in 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll call this 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Call this 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Call this 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Call this 4. And there should be a little bit of space above. So if my initial value here was at 0, I'm going to multiply it by 2, which stays at 0, and then I'm going to add 3 to it. So my initial value was down here. I'm going to add 3 to this. So my graph actually starts up here at 3. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna have to redo some of my values here. My apologies, because things are gonna have to be a little bit smaller. I'm gonna double this all up here. I'm gonna call every 2. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so here's my graph. I'm going to redo this again. Sorry, Kate. So starting at 0, okay, I'm going to multiply all my y values by 2, so that stays at 0, and then I'm going to add 3. So my starting point's actually right here. And then my first point at 90, sine of 90 was 1, and I'm going to multiply that by 2. So my next value would have been at 2, but then I have to add 3 more. So I go 1, 2, 3, and I'm actually up here at 5. Okay. Okay, and my next value would have been 0 again. It goes back down to this line. And then my next value, 270, that's usually at -1. And I'm going to multiply -1 by 2, and I get -2. But then I'm going to add 3 to it. So that actually brings me up to 1. So my value is just going to end up here. Okay. And then my next one, the 360, is normally at 0. Okay. But if I multiply it by 2, I still get 0, and add 3, I end up at 3. So my wave, my sine wave, actually looks like this. Okay. So what have I done? I just made sure that I have enough space here. This means we're moving coordinates up. This means we're stretching coordinates. So you need a lot of space above your graph. You also have to remember that depending on how big this number is, will you actually need any negative coordinates? If this number was 2, or if this number was 1, then I might need some negative values down here. Okay. If this number was any bigger, like 4, and I had to multiply my value here that's normally a -1 by 4, okay, then it would be at -4, and if I added 3, it'd be at -1. So I'd actually need a space down here for that -1. So it's just important that you're creating enough space where you can actually visualize where the graph's going to go. And don't get discouraged if you have to redo the graph. Okay, that's going to happen. You're going to have to erase some things just like I did, and that's just how it goes. Okay, so you get some practice of getting an understanding of how to complete these questions. But that's where I'm going to leave you for now. Okay, so try the other two on your own, see how well you do. And if you do have questions about those other two, we can talk about them next time. Okay, Kate, good luck.